Hello and welcome to the Good Girl Confessional podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Lowres, and the Good Girl Confessional podcast is proudly brought to us by WB40, Women Beyond 40, for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond who want to talk about grown-up stuff. You can check us out at WB40.com. Before we begin today's podcast, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we record this podcast. In my case, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. Today in the podcast, I am very excited to introduce you to an extraordinary woman. Her name is Nicole Webb. Nicole is a journalist, a book publicist, an author publicist, and she's been a newsreader. She is quite an extraordinary human being. She is also the author of her book, China Blonde, which explores her time living in China and all the adventures that she went through. It's a fantastic book. She is just an absolute delight. She is a woman who seeks adventure and always seems to find it. Please welcome her to the podcast, Nicole Webb.
Hey there. When Sandy's not interviewing kick-ass women, she's hanging out with me at Alex the Seal, a podcast about music and nostalgia. I'm Jo Pybus, and each episode, Sandy and I talk about all the songs that got us hooked up, knocked up, and broken up. Do yourself a favour and search Alex the Seal on your podcast app. Love you, Molly.
Hello, Nicole. How are you? Welcome to the confessional.
Oh, Sandy, I am so glad to be here at last. It has been a bit of a runaround to get here, but we made it, and I'm very excited to talk to you.
Yeah, look, I'm super excited to have you here. And, wow, your life has been crazy hectic and very, very busy. So I'm very grateful you got to get to jump in and join us today.
Me too. Thank you.
So we should tell everyone what is going on in your life because it's so busy. There's so much. First of all, let's start with you've had to move house more than once.
Not once, but 3 times this year.
Wow.
So this is very boring and I won't go on about it, but our house in inner city Sydney flooded in March with all those massive floods. It wasn't a major flood, but we were in the UK, and when we came back a few weeks later, mold just started sprouting, and not just any mold. We lifted a big mirror and it was black, thick, huge mold that was just get out of the house now sort of thing. And I've got a bit of an autoimmune issue. So we went and we thought we were going to have a staycation. We went to the Sheraton Hotel and we thought, just a few days. 14 weeks later, we were still there. And thank goodness we were able to be there. But, it was there, and then we had to get out and get into an Airbnb. So we went to one, and then that kind of ran out after 2 months. It was booked out, and now we're in another one. So here we are, and it's been a bit of a, crazy ride. I really feel for people that are in much more serious situations than us.
Yeah, it's just been really extraordinary, hasn't it? Just watching all of this unfold sort of right across Australia and thinking, wow. You're right, so many people affected. But I'm glad that you guys got out and that, you, as you say, luckily you were able to find other accommodation because it's a long drawn out process. And I think there's insurers are like kind of, so behind the 8 ball because there's so many people and, whatever the thing may be, but it must be so frustrating.
I think they said they had... Normally, they might have 3,000 cases at a time. And when we first spoke to them, 70,000 cases. So, they're up against it. And, so to stand out and get any attention is tough. So
wow.
You jump up and down a lot.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? But crazy. But the nice part about what's going on in your world is that you have this extraordinary career. I think you're absolutely bloody fabulous.
Thank you. I'm not sure I agree, but thanks.
No, you are. You're amazing. So tell everybody who doesn't know who Nicole Webb is, everybody should, tell us what it is that you do.
What do I do? Well, Well, I'm in media. I guess I'm a journalist by trade. And I always say that first and foremost, because I guess that's what I think I am. I'm a journalist. I started out when I was 25 and did that for a very long time. And that led me to Sky News, where I became a news presenter, which I did for about 10 years. And then we moved overseas and we came back about 6 years ago. And I've sort of just been doing all sorts of things media related, from media training to, which is, training corporates how to, be on camera and get interviews with the media, to some MC work along the way, blogging when I was an expat, writing a lot of articles. And then I published my book in 2020 in COVID, which was about our life in China. And off the back of that, of course, I did my own publicity because I know a lot of journalists. I know the media landscape. I know what they're looking for. And then after that, this kind of wave of other authors wanting my help came about. And that sort of side gig has turned into like a full-time hustle. And I love it. It's kind of like a job I never thought about, and it's kind of the best of both worlds. It's like perfect for me. So, yeah.
How
and I'm
fantastic.
sending them all your way.
You are. And so we should, I wanted to point that out as well, that you have always been so incredibly generous in terms of introducing me to some amazing women who have written books and have had such adventures in their life, a number of whom, of course, have been on this podcast.
Yes.
And I love that because it feeds into exactly, we're both on the same page, that women have extraordinary stories to tell.
They do.
And, you just want people to know those stories and know that those books are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. There's just so many incredible women, as you say, doing so many different things. It's just awe-inspiring. So, yeah, I love it when I get one that I know is going to be right up your alley.
Well, we do love a good story here in the confessional, yes. That's for sure.
We do.
And I love that a lot of the women that you have introduced me to, they've written books, and generally it's a memoir or it's a, instructional kind of thing. But really, they love to come in and actually tell me all their like little confessions in here as well, which is brilliant. Now, we always say
and
confessions.
You're great at getting those out of them. Before you know it, they're off on this tangent about, did you know?
I know, it's fabulous.
Yeah.
It's so great. We love it. We always say that, confessions are always welcome, but they're certainly not compulsory.
Yeah, I love it.
So, speaking about books, hello, look at this beautiful, for those who are watching along.
Wow.
I am holding up Nicole's beautiful book. It is called China Blonde. And it's how a newsreader's search for adventure led to friendship, acceptance, and peroxide pandemonium in China. I love that. I love the tagline.
Yeah.
It's an absolutely beautiful looking book, but absolutely beautifully written.
Not with me, not counting me on the front, which I didn't anticipate, but it is a beautiful cover, the design and everything. Yeah.
It is, but more importantly, it's an amazing story that you tell. Now, I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but I guess we really need to tell anyone who hasn't read the book China Blonde. Tell us about your journey, how you ended up in China and the discoveries you made while you were there.
Wow, how long have you got? It's just, okay, I guess the first thing is that I married in a man who is in hotels, who I met on a blind date. And as they say, the rest is history. And at the time I was a career girl, television newsreader, I'd thought about moving overseas, but I had thought by then that time for me had come and gone. So we kind of just missed it until a job came up in Hong Kong, and I don't know, a light bulb went off and we both were on the same page and we thought, let's just do this, So we went to Hong Kong, quit my job after 10 years. I also found out that week that we were pregnant. So a bit of a double whammy, I always say. New foreign country, having a baby. There was a lot. But we had the most amazing 4 years in Hong Kong. It was just the time of our lives. It's a beautiful country. And, it's had its fair share of problems, obviously, since. But we spent 4 years there. Ava sort of grew up there. And then we had to make the move to China, which was the mainland. And we had kind of been maneuvering around that and putting lots of feelers out to move to other countries, like, Bangkok in Thailand or Seoul in Korea. There are all sorts of big jobs that came up, but that for some reason or another didn't work out. And China at the time, well, they still are, we're just building. I think 80 hotels in 1 year under the umbrella of Starwood that James worked for. So there was just no avoiding China. So eventually this town called Xi'an came up, and it looked, all you got to go by is Google, and it looked livable. It looked quite, pretty and quintessentially Chinese. So we said yes, and James went up to get his first role as general manager of the Western there. And that was 2.5 years. And, it seemed like a very long 2.5 years. It was culture shock huge culture shock because it was so different to Hong Kong. Even though I'd been to China in the past and I'd been to Shanghai, it was another step removed from Shanghai because, it was kind of like going back into the 70s. Nobody really spoke English, or if they did, it wasn't, it was just very basic conversation. Many of them had never seen a Westerner. So if you walked outside the hotel, we were fair game, and it was just on, especially with Ava, who was at that point, she was 3.5 or 4 with long blonde hair. They would just gravitate towards her. So there was a big, steep learning curve living in China, but it turned out to be an amazing experience and one of the best things that we ever did, and we came away with such a huge amount of respect and knowledge for China as it is, and so amazing lifelong friends.
Yeah, that's incredible. And tell us about, so you're pregnant and overseas and you're navigating doctors, etc. What was it like though when you got to China and navigating anything to do with, doctors or the medical system?
It was scary. I guess the language barrier is one thing. And I think I tell a story in the book when Ava, we were staying in the hotel for a while. Then we had an apartment sort of attached to the hotel. And there was those hobs, and it was just a 1 ring hob because they just use a wok. They don't really use anything else. And of course, Ava put her hands on it. It was bright red, and we turned it off, but it was still hot, and she just put her palm flat down and we could hear it sizzle. And I was like, oh my God, and it's, what do we do? How do we ring a doctor? We don't even know how to call one, what to say. And thankfully we were cushioned by the hotel bubble. So we could call the manager on duty, who then brought these doctors over. And it was like something out of Star Trek. They arrived with their white coats on, carrying their silver briefcases, marching into our house. And there was a lot of Chinese going on, and Ava's sobbing and didn't know what was happening. And I'm like, could she have some Panadol? Can't, booyah, don't do that. And they ended up just putting a bit of cream on it. But it was a pretty traumatic experience just for the fact that you actually don't know what's happening. In hindsight, it's quite funny, and but at the time it's just like, where are we? And we had a couple of trips to the local hospital, and that was just a comedy of errors too, because the local doctor there was so enamored with foreigners that all he wanted to do was practice his English. So he would walk us all the way out to the car, practically getting in the car with us, waving us off like we were long lost best friends. And it was just funny. But, they were such an embracing culture as well. They get a lot of a bad rap, Chinese, but they are, a very welcoming culture. I'd have to say that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And what do you think you learnt the most, I guess, about yourself in living abroad and traveling, but also to a non-English speaking country and immersing?
I think from Hong Kong and China, I just think that as humans, we are so adaptable. And if we let ourselves be, we really can do anything. And, nothing's forever. And if you go in with that mindset, I think, if it's that bad, you can always leave. You're not stuck, unless it's COVID. You are stuck. But it's just, I think, we can adapt to these situations, and we do. And it doesn't matter where you are and what's thrown at you. Humans are a pretty resilient bunch. So I think we can, get around it as we did. And if you've got you've got your family there.
Hello, Sandy here from the Good Girl Confessional podcast. The Good Girl Confessional podcast is proudly brought to us by WB40, a platform for women 40, 50, 60 and beyond. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to see the rest of the video, please head over to WB40.com and subscribe to WB40 Extra. By subscribing to WB40 Extra, you're helping to support the hard-won wisdom of incredible women. So thank you. Please remember to like, share and follow.